Swoop, boop, doo, swoop, boop, swoop, boop, boop, swoop, boop, swoop, boop, swoop, boop, swoop.
So there is a trend with modern fantasy in how morality is questioned or justified, and that is to give a lot of nuance and real ideological backing to the villain in your story. This is a trend I have praised again and again. It makes the hero more engaging because maybe they're not entirely right. It makes the villain more believable because mustache-twirling evil is not something we encounter in our daily lives, and it enhances your narrative because it can give you a lot of plot elements you otherwise would miss out on. If your bad guy really believes they are right and they're not just a villain, then this lends to an overall enhancement of the story being told to modern standards. Again, there's nothing wrong with mustache-twirling villains if you enjoy that. I like them too. It's called pulp, and it's wonderful. That being said, Robert Jordan didn't necessarily buy into this trend. Granted, The Wheel of Time came out before this trend was really at the forefront of fantasy, but his villains, the Shadow, really harken back to more of a classic fantasy villain. It's evil. It's this inherently bad, destructive thing. The Dark One wants to end the world, destroy reality. But this does not mean that the morality Robert Jordan wrote into The Wheel of Time was inherently lazy. For one, there's one villain in particular, Elon. Back in the Age of Legends, Elon decided to join this shadow, this destructive, this dark thing. Because of the way the reality works in the Wheel of Time, eventually the Dark One will succeed. There is no point in resisting resistance.
It's futile.
So while being a little bit above par when it comes to classic fantasy trends, Robert Jordan took the energy a lot of authors take into making their dark side have a lot more nuance and ideological backing to their beliefs, and instead he made it so that the light, the good side within the Wheel of Time is a lot more gray than first strikes the reader. It seems like upon base concept, the Wheel of Time would have good guys and bad guys. It's literally a story of light versus shadow, but that's really not the case upon a closer examination. The light within the Wheel of Time is often capable of more evils than the shadow, literally. For the prime example of this, we have to look to the fallen city of Shadar Logoth. This is a city that took fighting the shadow, fighting evil to such an extreme, it lost what made it human, and it became darker and more twisted than the shadow ever was. Later in the series, a man who quite literally embodies the evil that manifested itself in the halls of Shadar Logoth becomes so vile, he's able to torture, scare, and really dominate the shadow's darkest creatures. This proves that the humanity, the people who are supposedly on the good side, can go to places and be evil to a point where the shadow can't even really reach. This chaotic shadow, this wanting to destroy all, really at the end of the Wheel of Time we learn as readers it's more about just almost this entropy type philosophy, wanting it all to be over, wanting an end, and that's not necessarily an inherently evil thing when you really get down to it. It's just the absolute opposite of order. It's complete and utter chaos, a total entropy. Compare that to mankind's evil, or the way that the shadow is even filtered through humanity into this world. Well, the actual dark being behind the shadow is more of a just logical conclusion to the universe, a complete and utter equalization of chaos. When you turn around and filter that through the people who serve them, it becomes a more twisted, dark evil. The people who actually enjoy pain, the people who use any excuse to benefit themselves, the utmost selfish people on the planet, those are the ones who are willing to do anything to put themselves on top, and in the end result, you get the Forsaken. Maybe the most incompetent villains in all of fantasy when it comes down to many of their decisions, but there's justification for that. Only the most selfish people on the planet would be willing to throw everyone under the bus to simply have themselves on top, and enjoy and embrace the promises that come from this
Dark One.
Obviously, hollow promises we find out in the end, but they bought into them. They were willing to give it all up just to benefit themselves. Once again, this shows the evil of humanity to be further reaching into darker places than the shadow itself, in my opinion. Even the servants of the shadow, Trollocs and Myrddraal, were made by men when it comes down to it. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Daniel, these are all still people who serve the shadow, so you're really just showing the nuance of what is evil, and I agree. agree. So let's go ahead and look at the supposed servants of the light. Well, first of all, continuing into the example of those who serve the Dark One, there are many powerful people within the light who behind closed doors are servants of the dark. That is just clear throughout the series. The spiders of the shadow have reached deep within all corners of the light, letting the reader know that there is corruption and weakness within the light itself. But then we look at those who actually are not servants of the light. There are people who think they are doing the righteous and good thing within the Wheel of Time, who in actuality are causing horrific harm. There is the blatant example of the White Cloaks, a reflection of our own world's Spanish Inquisition, taking the purification and righteous morality to an extreme where you are massacring innocents on a scale that is just repulsive. They're willing to do anything to cleanse the world of the dark. And when you take the manifestation of good and bad to these extremes, you of course will have humans who are also willing to take it to extremes. Some of the most horrendous acts we see committed within the Wheel of Time are done by these children of the light. Personally, I think this is probably reflective of Robert Jordan's service in Vietnam. This is purely conjecture, and feel free to dismiss it entirely on your part, but that is a war that is really considered to have no righteous side. There were horrendous acts committed by all parties involved, and coming back from a conflict like that, I can see why Robert Jordan would write a world where, yes, there are distinct good and bad lines. That is the way it was presented to the American population at the time. Capitalism good, communism bad, go kill the enemy. But the reality of these situations is much more deep and nuanced. So coming back from a war where really I'm sure he saw people do terrible things on all sides, it makes sense that you turn around and create a fantasy world where the same kind of results come from this ideological extremism. Now to the final point of this video, even the most wholesome good characters we follow, the main good party, our heroes as readers, have to commit bad acts. I won't necessarily call them evil, but there is examples of some of our main protagonists committing people to be hanged, killing those who maybe not necessarily deserve to die, and failing repeatedly when they just needed to step up to succeed. Then this again shows the flawed nature of humanity, something I really enjoy that exists in this writing. And while a lot of modern fantasy authors are taking the time to flush out their bad guys, give them a real ideology that is somewhat believable, many of them fail to accomplish what Robert Jordan is doing here. Making your protagonist fail, having them make the wrong decision, makes your story reach a level of realism and morality that I think is rarely achieved. We, as the good guys, must question ourselves. We will fail. There will be wrong choices. That doesn't mean we're evil. It doesn't mean we're not good. But failing to realize this is somewhat evil, and that is one of our main protagonists' greatest struggle for a large portion of the series. Randall Thor, the Dragon Reborn, arguably his greatest conflict as a character is overcoming the fact that he will fail. His hubris is false. He cannot be the perfect dragon all the time. This is very blatantly seen when he accidentally massacres hundreds if not thousands of his own men, when he fails to save people that are close to him and results in the death of even more. He is a failing hero repeatedly, and it is not until he realizes that he is still a man, he is still a person, that he's able to achieve the true dragon state we see later in the series. His acceptance of his own flawed humanity is what results him into reaching this Christ-like figure we see at the very end. If you're unable to move past your own imperfections as a person, it can become incredibly hard to live with who you are and push you to darker and darker places. This is again balance between one of the Forsaken who reflects Rand repeatedly and Rand himself. Rand is able to let go, accept his failings at times, and move past them. I think a lot of what I'm talking about in terms of character realization of the world around them comes to its head, and one conflict in particular between Egwene and Rand al'Thor, the Amerlin Seat, and the Dragon Reborn. At the very end of the series, in a controversial conflict that some fans love and some fans hate, we see Rand trying to propose a dragon's peace, saying all nations must be okay with the boundaries they are in, wars must be stopped, and the Aiel will be a policing force who enforce this treaty. Basically, if anyone tries to invade another's lands, cause suffering for selfish gains, there will be hell to pay. You will have to deal with all of the Aiel clans coming at you with all of their might, something that no individual nation could dare stand against. This is Rand pushing back against the suffering he sees his allies around him directly causing. He knows that people are selfish. There is no light. It's an illusion. There's no good versus bad. There is simply pushing back against the shadow, and we as humans, our flawed selves, while we may call the light, will fail at this at times. We will not be perfect, we will fumble, we will try our best, and in the end, you can try to force a peace. We as the readers are not given any direct answers of whether or not this really worked out, because the series ends and it's up to our own interpretations, and there will be no more Wheel of Time stories as far as we are concerned, but it's an interesting idea I'd actually like to leave you, the viewer, with. Do you think Rand's Dragon's Peace really worked out for him? Do you think the Aiel were an effective enough policing force, or the Shan Shan's manifest destiny type mentality towards the Westlands will result in a continual warring onto infinity, because we as humans cannot get over our own egos and will continue to strive for more? That's my question for you, whether or not people can be good. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this Wheel of Time video where I ramble about morality and implications and make some vast assumptions about an author I never personally met. I hope it wasn't offensive to do. I'm just trying to do my best. Like and subscribe if you have not already. Hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.